Bah! Challenge the like button to a staring contest and around the 9th hour, intentionally lose by breaking your gaze to look at the full moon before stomping it into the ground. Shout out to Net for finding the stone in the last video. If you want a shout out in the next one, all you have to do is be the first to find it today and timestamp it in the comments. 4 years have passed since the defeat of the Kaioshins and the manifestation of Innocent Buu. Bibidi's many travels had finally led him to a small water planet, where he concealed his ship from the primates that inhabited this world for a quick stop. During the preceding months, he had conquered one world after another, forcing them to submit with the aid of his servants. Majin Buu was incredibly efficient, so long as he was fed. The wizard's power was such he had produced several clones of himself to stay behind and manage various planets. These copies were noticeably less powerful and did not possess the entirety of his knowledge either. But that was the best way, as they all knew better than to try to overthrow him. Since the fall of the Kaioshins, the sorcerer had been given over to his heart's content, but over time he had begun to tire a bit. Indeed, Majin Buu had become irritating and demanding, and little by little started to rebel in small ways. Just as his previous incarnation, he had disobeyed by turning entire populations into sweets, destroying cities that had great technological potential, or just flat out refusing orders, under the pretext he wanted to have fun, or he was just being pouty. That's why Bibidi had come to this particular planet, inhabited by a primitive species, in an undeveloped system in the North Quadrant. He was about to take a great risk, exposing himself to potential danger worried to be found by any enemies, though he desperately needed a break from babysitting. Although Bibidi had explained at length to Majin Buu that he was capable of sealing him back in his ball, the Jinn didn't seem to understand the gravity of the threat. It's possible he assumed it wouldn't be all that bad, or simply was unaware. The monster had previously hated the forced imprisonment, but the playful, curious, sensitive being he had become would be far more affected by the horrible solitude, silence, and darkness. Bibidi invoked the spell, which immediately sealed Majin Buu back inside. For a few moments, the Jinn looked around, though he saw nothing but darkness. Little by little, the confusion gave way to doubt, then to fear. He couldn't move, paralyzed. Hearing nothing, he panicked and screamed. He called for Bibidi, his master who had cared for him. He pleaded and begged to be released. For hours he called, then days, continuing to plead into the silent abyss. Finally exhausted, his consciousness faded, but not without adopting a certain hatred for the one who abandoned him. Once Bibidi had sealed Majin Buu, the wizard sat down for a moment on a nearby rock, gazing at the magic ball wary.
I'm sorry, Majin Buu, but I need a break. I'll stay on this world a little while to rest. I'll release you in a few weeks. Until then, you need to sleep.
He had barely spoken the words when a hand suddenly grabbed him by the throat and lifted him into the air. It was one of those detestable Kaioshins, somehow still alive. Impossible! How had one of them survived? Behind the Kaioshin was a red-shaded giant with long white hair, also wearing divine clothing. He looked suspiciously at Majin Buu's prison.
My information was reliable, Supreme Kai. The sorcerer did indeed cage the beast, as we had been told.
Perfect, East Kaioshin said, looking furiously at Bibidi. It's over, Bibidi! By sealing Majin Buu, you have given us the opportunity we were waiting for. I've already eliminated your doppelgangers. You're the only one left. The tyranny of Majin Buu will end, once and for all. Bibidi gasped, trying to get air into his lungs. He couldn't speak, let alone recite the incantation to set Majin Buu free. Was this truly the end of his reign? No. There was one last clone hidden away. His dynasty had not yet ended. His son Bibidi, newborn back in his lair, might one day carry it on. He gave one last provocative smile to the Kaioshin, who seized him with intense fury, decapitating Bibidi and pulverizing what remained of his body. After savoring his revenge and catching himself in the thrill of it, East Kaioshin calmed back down, somewhat ashamed. His servant standing behind him was called Kibito, having been born shortly after the deaths of the other Supreme Kais. Kibito was there to lend a helping hand to the last of the Kaioshin, and possessed several special abilities such as teleportation and healing. His role was that of a servant, but to some degree, an overseer of the universe as well. The two gods gazed at Majin Buu's ball, from which an enormous negative energy was still emanating.
What should we do about Majin Buu?
Kibito asked.
Try to destroy him?
Not necessarily, said the Supreme Kai after a brief reflection. I'm not certain we could. We might only free him in the process. No, we must be sure he stays in that ball forever. This planet is remote and underdeveloped. The dominant species hasn't even evolved to walk upright yet. There is little risk they will find it. Still, We must hide it deep where they will never reach it, just in case.
Agreed.
Thus, Kibito and the last remaining Supreme Kai hid Majin Buu's cocoon inside a tall mountain, where men would never find it. Bibidi had been the only being capable of releasing Majin Buu, so there is presumably no risk of leaving him as he was. At least, that's what they believed. 5 million years later, East Kaioshin would understand the extent of his mistake, for Bibidi had a son, one who would never let his father's death go unpunished. He would one day find the cocoon. It would be his life's mission to locate the hidden vessel and release the strongest creature in the universe.
Hi there, friends! It's me! Allow me to interject here. A brief diversion, I assure you. Certainly you recall I may do this from time to time. I did warn you in the prologue, but I feel you would need some context to help understand my feelings during this dark period after Bibidi. Before continuing, I must admit an element that poses some complexity. When I told you before that you would learn my feelings, there were two options, two perspectives from which I might speak. Either I give my impression at the moment of the story, that is to say at the time of my personal evolution, and therefore these painful, dreary moments where I was that brainless fatso, or an overpowered child without an ounce of savvy. Or, as I am now, the divine and majestic Jin of peak creation. I offer you the present solution, in correlation with the short epic that you are about to experience. I'll let you discover my way of thinking when I was fresh out of that cocoon. How does that sound to you? Shut up, Jeremy!
Boo? Majin Buu, is that you?
What is this small, high-pitched voice? I wondered. I turned to see a familiar form, one I did not like in the least.
But I remembered, oh, I certainly did.
The creature reminded me of that evil wizard who had manipulated me with cakes so long ago. A liar,
a meanie who had abandoned me, left me in the dark, forgotten all about me.
This small creature was a spitting image of him, but wasn't him. Still, I was so relieved to be free, and he was the one who had organized my escape. Buu will give him a chance. Buu will listen to him.
Once upon a time, in days long expired, the awakening long awaited. So ardently desire.
Wait, no, sorry, this doesn't work quite as well in video form. Basically, what I was about to do here was Dragon Ball Z the musical, but if you would like to read it, the part of me that absorbed the writer named Arctika posted it on the Dragon Ball Multiverse website. Nonetheless, let's continue. Once Bibidi was eliminated, my elation soared to new heights. My sense of relief felt so amazing. Freedom from that insect's unending insults and orders. He called me fat, stupid, a buffoon, said I belonged to him. Too bad, I wasn't so stupid after all, and I was learning quickly. Having got rid of the master, I didn't bother planning what I'd do next. There was some guy with very long yellow hair that had promised me a fight against tougher opponents, even than him. Someone that could defeat me! Such an exciting proposal gave me great excitement. I don't need to tell you. Though, that is why we're here, isn't it? When he first told me the existence of these guys, someone really strong, I was, in short, overjoyed. Of course, Bibidi had initially stamped out my enthusiasm with his usual nagging, a fact that did contribute to my resentment of him. But this was a fighter I could not stop thinking about. Son Goku. He was. An opponent capable of taking all my attacks and coming back for more, and inflicting heavy damage along the way. Once before, I had a similar feeling, though long ago, almost like a dream. Vegeta had offered me a small taste, but in the end had barely managed to draw out my real strength, in spite of his own self-destruction. But this promised fighter, if they were indeed stronger than Goku, already a confrontation that had been so much fun. Well, I was in the clouds, but I had forgotten the other parts of his request. That is, to not kill anyone else. I think, but he didn't ask too much. 2 full days of waiting, with nothing to do. Far too long. After spending so much time in prison, I wasn't going to waste a second of my freedom on boredom. For 1 whole day, I traveled the world, crisscrossing the surface in search of various amusements and entertainments. I raced over busy highways and city streets. I took in the sights and tried local cuisine. Cake, that is. I even tried my own handle at the culinary arts, creating a human candy buffet. Humans made such great ingredients, I made a clay house out of them as well.
Along the way, I remember crossing paths with one smaller human in particular. When I spotted him below, I hurried down to frighten him, as terror had been something I had been taught to invoke since my birth. I raised my fist and screamed, but shocked to find it had no effect. The boy merely smiled at me, his eyes shut tight. Naturally, I assumed he was too afraid to even look at me. But how could he not be afraid of me? After all, the entire planet was. It made me angry at first. It was time for my infantile mind to once again grow. Upon explaining to me he was blind and hadn't ever been able to see, somewhere in the back of my mind, I almost related to him. Being released from my ball by Bibidi after 5 million years of darkness, I was strangely akin to opening my eyes for the very first time. During that timeless entrapment, I had lost the use of my senses. I was but a shapeless porridge that crashed against the walls, asleep and desperate. Of course, my mind at the time couldn't fully process why I related to this boy, but nonetheless, it led to my first act of kindness, the birth of altruism, which Mr. Satan would nurture me in later. I decided, under the pretext of terrorizing him afterwards, to restore the boy's vision with my magic. Truly, when the first sight he saw was the avatar of destruction and cataclysm, he would flee in terror and my paradigm of the world would be restored. Plus, I'd get to throw a few energy blasts at him as he ran away. But he clung to me, holding me more tightly than I'd ever been held. I was amazed at the act of embrace, the thanks he gave, and the sincerity in his voice. I never before received affection of any kind. Certainly not a hug. My life had been nothing but killing, fighting, eating, and insults from my master. And yet, this little boy had acted like no other earthling, or no other being for that matter. He wasn't terrified, threatening me, or wanting something from me. One thing I could always tell was body language and emotion, and this was gratitude and admiration. I felt good for the very first time in my life.